Hey, my name is Belinda Doveston, and it is great to have you with me today for our weekly overview, the first one for March 2021, commencing the first of the month, 1st of March 2021. And when we have our month ends squashed around weekends, that means that in a few days' time, you will get the monthly overview for March to set our sights on what to pay attention to for the month ahead. And let's get into this week's overview, the first week of March, to see what the I Ching is asking us to pay attention to. First up, let's look at last week. Wow, we had Hexagram 11 piece. We had this beautiful changing line, said the connection is here, the moment is here, it'll change your life forever, this is a legacy moment. And we had the outcome hexagram 5, waiting, calling us to patience. And now I didn't realize that peace could be such hard work, and I've had some amazing feedback from many of you in the comments. Thank you all so much of your stories of what has happened for you this week, the connections that were made, the shifts that were made, the clarity and the connection and the moment of transition that really manifested for you this week. And I just am so grateful that these little miracles have been happening in our lives, because they shift the whole world. They shift everything that we can do when we make these shifts, when we take these shifts, when we liberate, when we step forward, and we pay attention to the connections taking place around us, and we lean in and we do the work that's necessary. Peace, last week, was a sweating effort work. Peace required energy. There's probably a lot that was going on for you last week, a very intense and jam-packed energy, but really wonderful. In our own family, a connected family member went through a massive moment of reconnection, a huge transition and leap forward, but very hard to do. You know, those moments come with effort. The moment arrives, we get the opportunity. They don't just bonk, happen. We actually have to lean in and do the work. And in this case, it was wonderful to observe the work being done and the moment being connected and the shift taking place in our own family. Really wonderful to see. Okay, so this week, let's have a look. We have our first hexagram is hexagram 60, limitation. If we look at the structure of the hexagram, we have water on top of a lake. Visualize that as a lake that's sitting there, or a dam, and water is coming into it. The river is pouring into the dam. And of course, you realize logically that at some point, unless the water is controlled, we're going to have a problem downstream. Okay, I think of this terrible crisis that happened in India with the glacier that crashed into the dam, and the dam broke through to the next dam, and loss of life ensued, a terrible tragedy. That's what happens when the controls aren't in place to prevent this flow of water from moving down the valley. So there really is no better way to describe this flow of change, what we're being asked to pay attention to this week, than this idea of a dam. And take that further, the dam, the hydroelectric dam, right? Because what happens is there's a whole lot of control mechanisms. There's already a dam, there's already a water, and of course we have to control this dam, because if we don't, water rushes down the valley and there's a massive casualty that happens. What we have to do is control the water that comes in, control the water that goes out, watch the valves, monitor, report, tracking systems to make sure we do not overdo the system. And then, of course, if we are wise, we can use that system and we can augment it with a hydroelectric plant, which allows us to then capture the power inherent in the water and therefore generate energy. So I want you to think about this week as an opportunity to put controls, limits, and structures in place that allow you to generate power. And we tend to think that limits impede my freedom, they stop me from doing what I want, and therefore they are disempowering. What we're talking about is finding a way to power through intervals, limitations, restrictions, and care over the flow. Okay, that's what we're here to do. So what might that look like? That looks like putting in place structures for your week. That might be managing your diary more discerning, in a more discerning way, putting discipline into the way that you engage with your week, the way you plan your week, breaking things up into intervals. The symbol that comes with this hexagram is taking, if you look at a bamboo stalk is segmented and has little notches along the bamboo stalk, and that is a symbol to mark off something. So we mark off the movement of time, we mark off the structures. Take a complex idea or a complex plan, break it down into small, manageable chunks, allocate those chunks, communicate those chunks, make lists, communicate effectively, control the flow of change that is being presented by putting in place the control mechanisms to support yourself. Perhaps it's about getting up early every day and getting a morning routine going so that you can manage the flow. Because what's inherent in this hexagram, in this flow of change, is that there's a lot going on. There's the pressure of a beautiful lake, which is joy, expression, teaching, communication. And we have the extra flow of the water coming in. So there's the risk of things overdoing themselves, of the water flowing over the edge. And our task is to control the flow of joyful expression of activity by putting in those mechanisms. It's like when we read a book, it helps us to psychologically understand the book when the book is broken down into chapters and they've got a heading and there's a table of contents. It's that idea. Take something that's complicated and more involved and break it down to things that are meaningful. Chapters, sections, intervals, timing, pacing, flow, and discipline. Okay. The thing about discipline and limitation is that too much is wrong too, because we can go overboard and we can impose very restrictive limitations, not just on ourselves, but on the people around us. And that's also not a great idea. Galling limitation is not the best form of limitation. All right, so let's have a look at this week's changing lines, because there are two, one in the 4th position and one in the 5th position. The 4th position gives us a bit of a clue as to what some of these limitations might be that could help us. And this story, we get back to the flow of water, is that when we put in place limitations, we must do them in a way that is naturally aligned with the thing we're trying to limit. Okay, so if we had a river coming down the valley into the dam and we're trying to hold up like a metal plate or a barrier or something to prevent the water from coming into the dam, that requires a huge amount of force. We're going to expend a huge amount of energy in managing the limitation in that way. And it's not aligned with what water needs. But if we divert the water into side tunnels, into aqueducts, into little streams, and we diffuse the water, so it's not a big torrent, but it's into little smaller streams and reunite those back when we need to, suddenly we have an essence of water that we've used the natural tendency of water, and we have found a way to naturally put a limitation on it. So this week, as we start the week, one of the things we have to pay attention to, what we're being asked to focus on, is in when we put in these limitations, whether that's over your team, whether your own personal life, yourself, whatever it is, the structure that you're needing to put in place to control this flow, is make sure it's natural. It's aligned to the type of thing you're limiting. Okay, and it might just require some thinking work, some reflection to say, is this structure that I'm creating the right structure for this thing, or am I using kind of a generalized blanket approach to everything and it's not going to actually deliver the result? I'm going to expend too much energy trying to control this flow. All right, so just put that into your thinking cap for this week. Is the limitation, the structure I'm using, is that aligned to the flow of the time, the type of thing I'm trying to control? The next changing line in the 5th position warns us about trying to force limits onto other people, where we rush out and we expect other people to fit into a control, into a limitation process or journey when we haven't yet walked that journey ourselves. So we could become unstuck this week if we impose all these limitations on other people. You will do this, you will now follow this form and this process, without actually putting those limits on ourselves. And what the I Ching is calling us to do this week is to take the limitation that you're wanting to impose, or the control that you think is necessary to prevent this dam from overflowing, and apply it to yourself, your own activity, your own business unit, your own personal life. You be the example of this limit in action. And what the I Ching says is people observe that, they want to emulate it because they see the flow of change working, and so they will step into the process to support you by doing so themselves. It's not going to work this week if you try and impose your view, impose your idea of limitations on other people when you have not imposed that limitation on yourself. You know, in your work situation, how are you behaving personally versus how you're expecting your team to behave? You know, are You're expecting them to clock in at a certain time and leave, but you come and go whenever you want to. What does that look like? What is the limitation that you expect others to abide by, yet you are not yet willing to do so yourself? Start with you. You be the example. You impose the limitation on yourself. And through that, you emulate what leadership means in your personal life, your business life, and others follow. And this is what the I Ching is cautioning us to pay attention to. So our second hexagram for this week, the outcome flow, the second flow of change or state of change we are being called to focus on is hexagram 54, marrying Maiden. Okay, we've had this recently, and this hexagram is very powerful, it's very deep. It talks about big cycles of change leading us forward, guiding us to where we need to be, the marriage being arranged and being drawn forward into a fate that perhaps we haven't chosen, yet is getting us actually closer to where we need to be. So if you feel like as much as you are trying to control your environment, and you should do through this limitation, on a micro level, keep doing that. On a macro level, you are being drawn into where you need to be. And sometimes, particularly in these weekly overviews, it's hard to see the bigger cycles of change playing out. But a marriage is underway, we're being guided forward, we're being pulled forward into our destiny, as it were, whether it's business or personal, and we have to just allow the cycles of change. So there's small cycles of change. Our focus must be on limitation and controlling flow, but appreciating that on the macro level, on the bigger cycles of change, things are clicking into place, even if we are not yet clear where these are drawing us forward to. Trust the process. Okay, very interesting week. I think it's going to be a lot happening this week. This energy inherent in this limitation, in having to control flow, brings us opportunity to build energy, to build power. Think about the hydroelectric plant that is generating clean power in our lives, clean energy that allows us to move into these big cycles of change that are calling us forward. Please subscribe, like, share. It'd be great to have you join us on the regular on this channel. If you're subscribed, new episodes come out every Sunday, so you are ready for the week. And of course, if you are following on the socials, I post those on Monday so that you can get the link if you prefer to do it that way. Either way, it is super to have you here, and really appreciate every comment, every like, every engagement as we work together as a community to really align ourselves with the highest possible path, with mastery of our life, of our business, of learning and development, and of learning to be of service in a much more meaningful way. Thank you so much for being here with me, and I really look forward to seeing you soon.